Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Himes here, and Bob Stewart is over there. Bob, how are you today?
Chad, I'll be honest, man. It's been, what we're going to talk about here today, it's probably been about 2 hours since this happened. What time is it? It's been 4 hours. Jeez, where'd the time go? It's been 4 hours since this happened, but I'm still a little bit animated by it. I'm one of these people that when something happens to me and I feel like it's a story worth telling, I got to tell somebody. So unfortunately, Tim and Jake, that run our sales teams here at Ben's company, when they were the first people I saw when I walked in the door, and it was really appropriate for them. So they got the first version of the story, which let a little bit of the smoke off of me. But when we were talking about I'm like, I got this thing that happened. Maybe we talk about that. So
before Bob gives it all away, folks, what I want to say is this. People ask me all the time, do you guys script these conversations? No, right? 30 seconds ago, Bob said, I want to talk about this. I don't know how long this episode's going to be. I don't know how well this episode's going to go. Now, are there some episodes where, yes, we sit down and do a lot of research because we know we really want to bring the top 8 things to this, that, or the other thing? Yes.
Yeah, how many episodes have we done? We're at 220 or 30 or somewhere in that range, 220 episodes, something like that.
Bob, we're closer to 300, just so you know.
Okay, so I'd say, if it's, let's just say call it 300. We've probably have a slide deck or the presentation research that we worked from on 80 of those 300. If I was just ballparking it, Chad.
And Ben was on 70 of those.
Yeah, he likes to work from his slide deck. Yeah.
Yes. So he's the one that likes us to work from the slide deck. Bob and I just like to have some fun. And audience, we want to take you along. I don't know how many people have said to me during the wealth series, Chad, was that all scripted? It's no, that was us having conversation. Folks, I would have known there were no Mustangs in the 1950s if that was scripted, right?
That's great.
We wouldn't have put that in the script that way. It made me look that silly. But I've gotten a lot of support, so I appreciate that from our audience and listeners who said, I didn't know Mustangs weren't around then either. Okay, here's the other thing I want to say, Bob, congratulations. You're wearing a hat I've seen before. So this is good progress, as everybody has heard. Bob's not buying hats right now. Now, Bob,
I don't know when this episode will drop, but it's being recorded in January, and I'm still hat buy purchase free in 2023 right now.
I was giving you credit, Bob. The fact that it's actually 11 days into January isn't that impressive, yet they won't hear this probably till February or March. And I wanted them to feel you've been doing a good job.
I feel like I have, even for 11 days for me is a pretty big deal. So
okay. So Bob, here's the thing. You announced this on a recent episode. You and your wife have been looking for a long time for an investment, kind of a second home property sort of thing. And literally, audience, if you were listening, Bob got the accepted offer mid-podcast. He became useless as a podcast co-host because he just totally stopped paying any attention because he got that. Yet, Bob, that's going to lead to what's going on. And one of the lessons Ben has taught for years, he's got what he calls his success principles.
Yeah.
And principle number 1 is what, Bob?
Say the right thing.
Okay. And that's really the foundation that we just kind of said, okay, that's going to be the foundation of today's conversation. And we're just going to go from here. Tell our audience what sparked this conversation today.
Yeah. So this has happened to me actually a couple of times over the course of this process over the last 3.5 years that my wife had been looking for a home, Chad, where we'd gotten to a place where we were making an offer and, it had been a while. And so the mortgage person had to go and re-pull our credit. And so if you guys are in our industry, real estate, I hope you know that when your client goes and gets their credit pulled, there's these things called trigger leads. And, the major credit bureaus, Experian, and let's just say Experian, right? When my credit gets pulled there, Experian then on the backside is willing to sell the fact that my credit got pulled to anybody who's willing to buy that. And so that includes other mortgage people, right? Who are like, oh, this guy got his credit pulled. Maybe he's doing a loan. Let's call him. Insurance people, Chad, real estate-y type people, right? So I became basically on January 3rd a trigger lead. Now, today, and you guys won't hear this episode till February or March because we're in the middle of the wealth series as we record this, but It's January 11th, Chad. So for the last 8 days, on average, every day, I've gotten somewhere between 30 and 40 phone calls.
Well, let me say, Bob, there must be something about you over me, because when we applied for our last and had our credit pulled for the home that we bought here in Atlanta, I didn't get that many calls. So either my phone blocks them better than your phone, or they just knew who they were calling and said, no, we're not calling that guy.
Could be, could be that your credit got pulled in a different bureau that doesn't sell as many trigger leads than the bureau mine got pulled
Could be
out
beginning of the year, so that, in that situation, the people are like, oh, we got to get the business rolling. Who knows what it is? Yet you've been blown up.
Yeah, it could be that, like, on the little reverse, a lot of times they'll use those reverse prospecting type tools like a Ben Verified or a White Pages. Could be that there's more information in there about me. Like maybe they see I own a house in there, and maybe your Ben Verified doesn't show your last couple items. Like there's a bunch of factors, right? But it's consistently every day been 30 to 40 phone calls. In fact, we recorded an episode before this. I got 5 phone calls in the episode we recorded before this while we were sitting there. So this morning, on my drive up to Bellingham, because I have about an hour and a half drive, and Chad, once a week or once a month on that drive, I do it every week, but once a month, I will listen to nothing. Normally I listen to a podcast every once in a while. I'll listen to sports radio or something if I'm trying to just get out of business mode and clear my head. But once a month, I force myself to drive the entire hour and a half without listening to anything. I just sit in silence in the car and I think through relationships.
Is that difficult for you?
Well, it's difficult enough that today I decided, you know what? I'm going to answer a few of these calls.
Okay, so put a pin in that, Bob, because that's going to be another episode that you can't go an hour and a half in the car just with your own thoughts without the distraction.
I think a lot of people have a problem today sitting in their own thoughts for more than a few, especially if your phone's nearby. We always go to that thing. But
future episode. Got it. All right. But
sure.
Today you decided to answer these calls.
Yeah,
and so if they would say the right thing.
Yeah, and so how if you've ever been on the other side of these, you kind of get an idea of how they work. Sometimes they're calling from an area code they think is local to me. So a lot of the calls are coming from 253, 206, 425, which are kind of our local area codes up here in Northwest Washington. And then sometimes they'll spoof you and call you from a number that's the same area code as your phone. And I have a 408 area code, Chad, which is based out of the Bay Area. So this morning, as I'm driving up here to Bellingham, the very first call, I'd probably been 30 minutes into my drive, right? It's 8 in the morning, 8:15. First call is a 408. I'm like, I'm going to answer this. So I answered it. I proceeded over on that 90-minute drive to answer 5 calls from these people. I just once I answered the first one, I'm like, I'm going to answer all these. I want to see how these calls go. I want to see how some of these people's script is. Who are some of these people? Is it all mortgage people? And it didn't end up being all mortgage people, by the way. So the first call, and I answered, right? And the guy's like, Mr. Stewart. And I can already tell, by the way, and I know this, and maybe some other, it's a dialer. Because when I answer hello, there's nobody there right away. And then I all of a sudden, a second or two later, I hear some shuffling. And then the guy says, oh, hello, Mr. Stewart. So it's a dialer right away. I'm like, okay, I know what this is, right? But hey, this is Armando. I'm calling on behalf of XYZ Mortgage. And, we're notified that you'd recently pulled your credit, and we're just curious if you guys are thinking about getting a mortgage or buying a house. And I said, yep. And I decided when I'd answer, I was going to be short. I was going to give him I was just going to answer his question, essentially.
Good for you.
Right? So he said, are you looking to get a mortgage? I said, yep. He said, okay. And so he was clearly reading from a script or had a list of questions that he was going to ask me. And it was actually a pretty succinct call, right? So he went to the next one. Okay, do you guys own a house now? I said, yep. And he kind of went down the list, right? So are you guys going to be selling that house? Nope. It's a second home. I think that was the one time I let it go a little bit further than I wanted to. I actually answered a question. He didn't ask me. No, it's a second home. I said instead of just no. I was pretty curt with this guy. But now, as I was being curt, he was actually adding a little bit of flavor to it. He had a really good, Chad, energy to him. Like it almost felt like I felt like he was standing up and moving around a little bit. Like he had this certain energy that was coming off of him that just, I don't know, it felt better than the other 4 or 5 people I talked to that almost had zero. But so Armando gets me to this point where I've given him a bunch of details. I've told him, he said, have you guys been approved for a loan already? I said, yep. He said, how much money do you plan on putting down? I told him how much is the loan amount. I gave him the zip code of the where we were buying the property. Like I gave him all these details.
Now, hang on a second. Why did you keep going with him, yet you didn't with the other people?
Okay. One, because he, like, every time I'd ask the question, he knew what to say next. Like he had the follow-up. So again, to me, it felt like he was working from a script. I kind of know he was, right? It's like he needs to get these 12 questions answered in order to qualify me to move me down to the next person that he was going to end up connecting me to. But he clearly had a plan of what his objective was on the call with me.
Okay.
And so I was like, all right, I'll keep answering these questions. They were easy enough, right? And honestly, with the mortgage, look, we're into the mortgage. But in my head, I was like, I don't know, I'd give him enough info to get a quick rate quote, right? I'd love to see what his company's rate quote might be against what we think we're going with right now. So I did have like, maybe on the third call, I was like, I was just answering them to see kind of what the person, how they interacted with me. And I was like kind of fed up at that point. But on that first call, I really was giving this kid a shot. So we get to the point where he says, okay, listen, Bob. And there was a little bit of banter in there too, right? Like as I said, no, we're it's going to be a second home. He was like, oh man, that's amazing. Like a place for you to take the family or something. Like how far from where you live today? Like he had a script clearly that would take him to the next question. But like as I was answering the questions, Chad, he was having some interaction with me. Like he felt like a real human on the other side, not just some dude reading a script. Now, I've been around sales long enough and watched what we train and to know that he clearly was looking at something that was detailing what he wanted to get from me next. Yep. But he was a smart enough kid that he was moving inside of those questions and kind of building rapport with me, right? He was like kind of making me feel kind of good.
Yep.
We get to a place where he's kind of gotten everything I think that's on his checklist, right? And I'm a qualified lead. And he goes, he's like, okay, listen, I'm gonna give me about 20 seconds. I'm gonna connect in my partner who can actually get you a quote. So I'm like, sweet, sounds good. And right before he hung up, I'm like, hey, Armando, are you gonna get a bonus for kicking me over to that guy? And he kind of laughed, and I'm like, seriously, like, what do you get? Like $25 for setting this appointment you're about to kick over? And he kind of laughs. He's like, actually, it's less than that. It's probably not as much as I should be getting or something like that. Yeah, I kind of laughed. I said, yeah, no, totally, I get it. All right, man, let's go. What's next, right? And so he goes on the phone.
So you gave him the commission by getting transferred over.
Yeah.
To hang up.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, he probably got
that's good of you, Bob.
$10 or $15 or $20, right, for setting the little transfer over to Mark, who's the next guy. So he says, I'll be right back. It's kind of dead air for 10 seconds, right? And then all of a sudden, I hear like Mark pick up. Hello, this is Mark. And he says, hey, Mark, this is Armando. And I've got Bob on the line here. And he's looking to get a quote. And I swear to you, it almost sounded like Mark didn't even know who the hell Armando was. Like, it was the first time this Armando guy had ever called Mark. He was caught off guard and he was like, oh yeah, just give me just a sec. It was just very like a awkward transfer, right? And I'm like, this is like literally their business model is to get Armando to set an appointment with me to transfer me live on the phone to Mark. And Mark doesn't know what the hell's going on here. Well, that's weird, right? So we get in. The first question Mark asked me is, okay, so you guys are looking to do a mortgage. Are you a first-time home buyer?
So basically, he asks questions Armando already answered.
He asked his first 5 questions were all questions, Chad, that Armando had asked me. So on number 1, I was like, no, we own a couple homes. I was kind of like, what? And then his second question was like, okay, so this is going to be a second home and you're keeping your first home? I'm like, yep, just like I told Armando. Third question, yep, just like I told Armando. I think maybe he got to like a 5th question that was finally one Armando hadn't asked me. And I'm kind of irritated at this point, honestly. I'm like, I just short answer, and he goes, hey, listen, here's what I'm going to do. Give me 20 minutes. I'm going to run some numbers and then I'm going to call you back. And here's what I said to him. This is like almost word for word. I go, all right, so that's your plan? I'm like, let me tell you something, Mark. I've probably gotten 30 or 40 calls a day from guys like you, and I get it, right? The trigger leads or whatever I am. 30 or 40 calls a day. I haven't answered any of them until today. I finally answered a Armando call. It's the first call. I'm like, if you want to risk hanging the phone up here with me right now and then calling me back in 20 minutes and hoping that I answer your call in 20 minutes, okay, but I don't think it's a good idea, man. I think you should probably try to work through this with me because I don't know if I'm going to answer the phone again. I'll just be honest with you. Want to know what he said? Man, I need that 20 minutes to get these numbers together. I'm like, okay. By the way, he never called me back. He never called me back.
At least Armando made his $10.
Yeah, I hope Armando made his $10.
Okay, so Bob, look, I'm actually surprised you aren't a trigger lead for like, New Era, that they haven't been calling you saying, Bob, where'd you go? What happened? Yeah. Let's talk through some of this. Okay. One, what's the biggest takeaway you've experienced over this last 8 days of all these calls? What's the takeaway just from the phone ringing that much? How does our audience, we know a lot of them are in sales, how should they be learning from this?
Yeah. So a couple takeaways. Most of it, I could go look on my phone right now and just look at all the red missed calls that I've had 23 today. So it's friggin' 1:00, by the way, 23 missed calls. These are all like people that call me that I know I have their number. And these are all the numbers I don't know. They're all 253, 206, 425, and 408. Right. Here's the biggest thing I noticed. Only two, let's just say, I'm looking here at probably the last 80 or 90. Two of them have called me more than once. They're all just calling me once, and that's it. Okay. Now, maybe they're spoofing me from lots of different numbers or something, but consistently calling from the same phone number, probably a good idea. Like if the person calling me on day one was still calling me on day 8 and I could see it was the 6th time they'd call, I might finally answer. Maybe not, but at least in my head, I'm like, ooh, that guy, he's trying hard. Right? He's a consistent dude. He shows up all the time. Like he's somebody I might put my loan with. Right? That'd be the first thing.
So lesson one, and Bob, you'll absolutely remember this. Those of people who've been around a long time in our world might remember this. Those newer won't know what I'm talking about. Ben built his business on something called the 10 days of pain. Now, Bob, today is day what for you?
Day 11, 3rd to the 9th, 3rd to the 11th, day 8.
Day 8. So, Bob, for the first 7 days, you didn't do anything. On the 8th day, though, because now it might not have been the same person continuously, but on the 8th day, you finally got to a point where you said, fine, I'm going to answer some of these folks. Consistency, you got to keep coming at them. And what Bob is saying in this is, if he had one number he recognized calling every day, that might have been the one that he said, all right, I've seen this number every day. I'm going to give this person a shot to see who and what they're calling about, because at least they've been consistent. So one, stop giving up on a potential lead quickly, because it took someone like Bob 8 days before he actually answered the call.
Okay. So here's the second.
Number two, Bob?
Number two. Well, look, it's a lot of calls. Let's just say it's 100 phone calls I've gotten. It's more than that, but let's say it's 100. It's really easy for me to count the number of texts I've gotten from those same people. I've gotten 3.
Ooh. Okay. Did you respond to the text or did you ignore those two?
I did not respond to the text, but I didn't get a second text from any of those people. I got one text of 100 people that called me. 3 of them texted me, and none of those 3 texted me more than once.
Okay. So more than one form of communication would help.
I don't have any.
If the number had texted you and was calling you, that number is going to definitely stand out.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they were texting me, because here's the thing, if they were texting me, one person texted me before they called me.
Yeah, I know this strategy.
And so when I got the call, it said maybe Joanne.
Right.
Like her name was she's like, hey Bob, this is Joanne. I know that you were looking at maybe getting a mortgage here soon. Something, right? Her little text. I didn't respond. But then when she called me later that day, it said maybe Joanne. And I was paying attention. I'm like, oh, she's good. Right? She's good. At least I might answer a maybe Joanne as opposed to just a 425 random.
So
I
folks,
knew she was the one that had texted me before.
The lesson Bob's sharing for you right there, text them before you make that call. Put your name in your text, because your phone is smart enough to recognize those numbers go together and see the name. And now it shows up and it says, well, this might be Bob Stewart calling you, right?
Yep.
And if you got that call, now all of a sudden you're going to pick it up because you're more likely to think you know who that person is. So that's a great tip. Multiple forms of communication. Texting, use that name in there when you shoot that out. Bob, any other ahas coming to you?
I want to share with you the I think it was the third call that I ended up taking for my next aha. So on the third call, the gal that her name was Anna, and she had a really good script in the beginning. Hi, Mr. Stewart. This is Anna. I work with some local real estate teams here in the area, which immediately, because I sniffed this stuff out, right? Immediately, I'm like, okay, that's pretty good. But local real estate teams here in the area, like what area? I wanted to say to her, but that's not what I said. So she said, hey, Bob, this is Anna. Well, I'll tell you what I said. I work with some local real estate teams here in the area. And we were wondering if you guys, if you had thought about selling your home sometime soon. And so like immediately I was like, wait a minute. Because I hadn't answered any of those calls before. It made me think though, like, oh, I see. A trigger lead when I pulled my credit to call me to see if I have a house to sell. Because if I'm pulling my credit to go buy another house, maybe I'm going to sell the one I live in. That makes a lot of sense. Smart. Makes a ton of sense. So that's what she said. And I said, oh, what team? And she said, if you'd like some information about us, I can send it over to you. And I said, that would be awesome. And instead of saying, what's your email address so I can send that info, she just went into the next little part of her script. Like she literally couldn't get off the script. She didn't have like Armando. He was piping things in. There was a few times I could tell I took him off, but he could get us back, right? But it wasn't just weird, just like cut off my question and get back to his script. He would deal with whatever I'd taken us off course on and then get back to his script. She just like olayed my question like she was, like I was a big bull. And she was just like, whoop, next question, which is, have you guys thought about selling? So she just I gave her this opening, I guess, to get my email address because I would have let her say, I wanted to see what she was going to send me anyway. I would have given her my email. Anyway.
Sure. Okay. So lesson I'm hearing in there, folks, to share with each and every one of you is, and the way I teach this as an easy analogy is think about the road trip that you're going on. You're going from point A to point Z on that road trip. And then if Waze tells you, get off this exit and go this way and you're going to do that. And then you're going to casually at some point end up probably back on that highway to continue that road trip. As Armando did very well with Bob, he took the detour when Bob threw it at him. He handled the detour and drove back onto the next on-ramp. Whereas Anna here, I think you said her name was, when you gave her the detour, she just put up a big sign and you just drove right through it and she paid no attention to it.
And just right back to her original question, which is, do you have a house to sell or are you considering selling the home you live in or something like that? And so I said, this one was the most shocking. I said, well, for the right amount of money, sure, I'd sell my house. And this is what she said. She said, well, why don't you check on that and get back to us? And then she hung up. And I was like, what?
She Googled you and realized that you were a real estate person by that point.
Maybe, man. I don't know what, but it was just so. But here's the aha for me out of that. Right.
Okay.
And this is what I said to Tim and Jake when they were the first persons that had to hear my story. When I was kind of heated at that point. I'm like, I got 5 calls. They were all pretty bad. Like, my takeaway was, do you have people calling on behalf of your business? And do you know what they're saying? Right? Do you know what they're saying? Have you scripted with them? Do you know what they say when this person says that? Do you know that they're capable, like Armando, or incapable of even getting off of the script that we gave them when we sat them down to start making calls on behalf of our business?
That's a great point, Bob.
Right? And so that I was like, Tim and Jake, like, when's the last time you listened to all these guys? Like, when's the last time you listened to a whole call with all these guys so you could hear all the times that they might have got derailed and how they got back on track?
Forget that. When was the last time you purposefully called them yourself from a different number and pretended you were a consumer or asked a family friend to be a consumer?
I call that secret shopper. When's the last time you secret shopped your own business to see?
Correct.
When's the last time? I do this in our world all the time. I'll go sign up on, use different names, but put my phone number in and sign up on our teams. I just want to hear what they say when they call us. I do it all the time.
Folks, you should be absolutely secret shopping those that you are counting on. If it's you and you're a solo entrepreneur, you can't secret shop yourself. You know what you're calling, right? Yet, if you have people that are speaking on your behalf, like Armando here was and Anna here was for Bob, you've got to make sure every now and then you spot check them. And that doesn't mean stand over their shoulder and hear their half of the conversation. It means being the person on the other half of the conversation when they don't even realize it's you, and see how far they get with you. Bob, those are some great lessons from an experience that you're having. And I look forward to you pulling your hair out. Actually, at the time of this recording, I will be in the car with you in a few days. And I look forward to, seeing if maybe we answer those calls together and really screwing with them.
That's right. So, well, what time are we going? Oh, yeah. Well, it'll be a Sunday morning. They call on Sundays, by the way. Like, who knows? So yeah, Sunday morning we'll be driving up to Bellingham and we can answer a few of those calls together, man. But get ready to be like we'll be looking at each other like, what? Can you believe that? That's crazy. But
and nothing drives me crazier, an audience. You may experience this as well. When I call a company and they are clearly reading a script, right? And it, again, when you have a problem and they're always like, I'm really sorry for that. I'm like, okay, look, let's just save both of ourselves some more. Stop telling me you're sorry, because I know you're not. You're reading it, and that just makes me even angrier, right? So stop apologizing for something you're not truly apologizing for. Well, folks, make sure your scripts are right.
And Ben always says this. I do not want my people practicing on my prospects.
Yes.
I don't want you practicing your scripts on people you're calling in our database. Like, I want you, we do, like in our world, and we're in real estate, but this is, look, anybody who has to get on the phone to make sales of any nature or build rapport with clients or whatever, right? We practice our scripts for a half hour every single day, right? Half hour every single day, practice at saying the right things so that we can make sure when we let our people go out there and talk to our real prospects that they're not practicing, Chad. They practiced that scripts this morning. They practiced that script yesterday, for the last week, for the last month, for the last year, for the last 5 years. Right?
Yep. They don't practice on your clients, practice on each other.
Yeah.
Okay. We titled this episode, Say the Right Thing, because it doesn't matter. Scripts matter. Right? I don't care what you do. I don't care what situation you're in. And so many people are out there saying, I don't like doing scripts. Okay. Bob, script. When your teacher walked in grade 1 and said, good morning, class, the whole class in unison said, good morning, whatever the teacher's name was.
Mrs. Boucher was my first grade teacher.
It was a script. Mrs. Pickering was mine, right? It was a script that we had. Folks, when someone comes up to you and says, how was your weekend? You probably have a script that you respond to. Even if your weekends are different, you probably have just what's a reflex conversation. When someone sneezes, what do we naturally say? We say, bless you, or gesundheit, depending what you say. It's a script, right? You have tons of them in your life. Add them to the important areas, which is your business, so you are saying the right things. Bob gave us some great tips in there, folks. Be consistent. Understand that just because they don't answer on day 1 doesn't mean they won't answer on day 8. Okay? Send those text messages. Put your name in the text message at least the first time, because the phone might help you make that contact when your name comes up on the screen. And 3, know the script well enough that you're not necessarily reading it. You might be filling in a form, yet you're not reading it, so that when Bob or your potential client there gives you a detour, you know how to follow the detour in conversation and bring them back where you need the script to be.
Ben's success principles is say the right thing, say it enough times, and have enough people to say it to, Chad. That say the right thing. Here's I know you know this guy, Naval. Ben has listened to his podcast. I love his podcast. They're these short little 2-3 minute things. And then sometimes he'll kind of bunch them all up into a longer one. But he's got this concept. So Naval, he's a Silicon Valley angel investor guy. He's made, he's probably a billionaire at this point, but really smart. He talks about this idea of specific knowledge, right? And he says, like all of us as humans get paid to the degree of our specific knowledge. So like I take my my day-to-day job in Ben's organization, I have deep specific knowledge in like real estate database management and maximization. Deep specific knowledge. Like I don't pat myself on the back, but I put myself up against anybody in this industry in terms of like going into a database and looking for opportunities, right? That's my specific knowledge. Ben pays me to pass that specific knowledge on to his 200 partners, right? Like literally this, I can gear down. If you're in sales, your specific knowledge is the scripts that you use and the things that you say to people on the phone. And your career, like I think Armando is going to do real fine in his career. He sounds like a young kid that's making $10 every time he sends an appointment. But I could tell that he's developing some specific knowledge around scripts and what to say to people. And over time, he should have Mark's job, quite honestly, the guy on the other end who, when I got to him, like,
well, I was going to say, Armando, if you're listening, come into the Facebook group, Win, Make, Give, reach out, tag Bob or I, say, this is Armando. We have a job for you.
You know what's funny, Tim, when I was telling Tim and Jake the story, he's like, do you have that guy's number? I'll call that guy back right now. You're saying he was a killer? Like he was really good? I was like, yeah, he was good. Tim's like, give me his number. And I actually do have his number. So I'll probably give it to Tim here this afternoon. He can call Armando back and maybe approach him.
And hope it's not an 800 call center that you end up at that you never know who you're talking to. Folks, scripts matter. Say the right thing. Say it enough times and have enough people to say it too, and success will be yours, whatever success looks like in that situation. Bob, thanks for sharing your headache, your frustration. Audience, we are going to continue with Bob on this second home journey because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of lessons that Bob's going to learn that we are going to be able to take into multiple areas of our world. So, Bob, be ready to just open the books on how this transaction goes.
Sounds good, man.
All right. Folks, as always, join us for the next episode. Find out what's happening in Bob's property. Find out what's going on. Who knows what we'll be talking about? We might make it up on the spot. We might have researched for days about it. Who knows? In the meanwhile, join us in our Facebook group, Win, Make, Give, so we can continue the conversation after the fact. And, as always, do good.